Hey YouTube, my name's Ed and welcome to my brand new YouTube channel, Tech to Boot. Today I'm going to teach you guys how to build a website from scratch. This is part 1 in a series I plan on doing where we get into all the basics of how to build a website, how websites work, how browsers work and interpret web pages and websites, and other cool things as well. So these videos are geared at people that don't know HTML or absolute beginners or people that are just curious how websites work. And we're working with the latest iteration of HTML, which is HTML5, with the latest tips, tricks, and standards as of 2019. And when I say we're building these from scratch, I mean no WordPress, no site builders, no templates, no frameworks, just from absolute scratch. And those are things that I want to get into later on, especially the WordPress. But today we're starting from scratch, so let's get started. Okay, YouTube, to get started, we're going to use a free text editor called Atom, and not like the biblical Adam, but the atoms that were made up of, ATOM. You could download this at atom.io. The link is also in the description. And this program is totally free. I believe it's open source and Mac and Windows compatible. So get started, install this. Of course, you could use any editor you want, but I recommend this one because it's very good. And I'm really impressed with it so far for being a free editor. And when you first open this editor, you're going to have a few things here, like your project panel maybe, a welcome screen, a guide. So you could close out of all this stuff. Okay, and we're going to get started creating our first web page. So we're going to go File, New, File, or you could just hit Control N, and we're going to save this file. For now, I'm just going to save it to my desktop, but you can save it anywhere you want. And I'm going to name it index.html, and I'm going to save. And if you did this, you just created your first web page. Congratulations. So the HTML extension tells us that it's an HTML file, and by default it should open in a web browser. And so let's try that right now. Here's my file. I open it, and there it is. If it doesn't open in a web browser like Chrome or Edge or Safari, whatever you use, then just right click on the file and open it in one of your web browsers. Okay, so here's our file, and another reason I named it index is because index is typically the name of your home page files on a web server. So whatever hosting you have, almost always the home page is called index, unless you're programming in like ASP.NET, in which case it's like default.aspx or whatever they use. So and by the way, you can change that later on if you learn how to configure web servers or whatever. You could change the name of your homepage files, but for now we're just going to name it index.html. Okay, to get started here, we're going to write our very first line of code, and this is called a doctype declaration, and it looks like this. You're going to use an opening arrow sign, and you're going to put exclamation point and the word doctype, space, and then HTML, and save. This tells our web browser that this is an HTML document, and specifically an HTML5 document. If you look at the history of web pages and HTML going back, there used to be different iterations of HTML, like XHTML and HTML4, and they had all this other kind of garbage you had to type in this doctype declaration, but gone away with that it is. It's all simplified now, and one of the biggest differences with the latest version of HTML5 is that you can write a lot less code to do the same thing, so that's good. Okay, next thing we're going to do is create our HTML tags, which tell the browser where the HTML starts and where all our code's going to go inside of. To do that, we're going to create an opening HTML tag, just like this, and I'm going to hit enter a couple times and create a closing HTML tag. So we want it just like that. And HTML, by the way, stands for Hypertext Markup Language. The terminology is not super important, but one takeaway from that to learn is that almost everything in HTML uses acronyms or shorthand versions of everything. So A paragraph, which we're going to get into shortly, is represented by the letter P. An anchor tag, which is for creating links, uses the letter A. There's a lot of shorthanding of things, just so you don't have to write out huge lines or words of code to do things. So that's a good thing. So the next thing we're going to do is create the head of our HTML document. So to do that, we're going to put opening sign and type the word head with a closing arrow. And I'm going to hit enter a few times and put a closing head tag. And by the way, the spaces and tabs I'm creating, this does absolutely nothing. I can hit enter here a few times and leave those spaces. It's not going to interpret it anyway differently with the web browsers. I can even put all of this in a straight line if I wanted to, and the browser would interpret it the same. It's just for human readability. You want things to be nice and spaced out. Typically, when we're stepping into code from another outside source like the HTML, we tab into that. And it's also a good habit to get into if you learn Python, because Python is the tab Nazi of programming languages, where everything uses tabs. But that's getting off topic. So the next thing we're going to do is create our body tag. So after the head tag, again, it doesn't matter how many enters you put or line breaks, we type the word body. And same as before, we're going to put a closing body tag. And this right here is a basic HTML template. And now, if we view this in the browser, we'll see that it does nothing, but it is your first web page, and it is a basic template. And now we're going to explain what some of this means. So, the head, think of the head as being something that is never physically shown on a web page. And the head contains things like your search engine description, your title, which we're going to do next, JavaScript, and all sorts of other things, style sheets, etc. So just think of the head as being things that you don't physically see on the browser or the web page itself, except for the title tag. The body tag, on the other hand, anything that you put in there will show up on the web page. So we'll demonstrate that right now. Inside of your body tag, you could type the words hello world or whatever you want to and hit save. That's just a common programming thing. And there it is, our first line of text on a web page, hello world. Again, anything in that body tag is going to be visible on this part of your screen on the actual web browser. Now, the next thing we're going to do inside of our head, we're going to create a title. So we'll create an opening title tag, and we'll call this my first web page with a closing title tag. Another good thing about Atom here and most other decent editors, they'll tell you if you spell something wrong or give you this autocomplete function. See how I start typing that and I can press tab, and well, in that case it did the wrong thing, but they give you some guidance and clarity with your code to not make mistakes. So we save and refresh, and you'll notice up here on my tab in Chrome that it says my first web page. So now you know what the title does. It creates the title of the tab for your browser visible at the top of the screen. And another thing that the title is important for is that it shows up on Google. So your website and web pages that are displayed in search engines, they typically use the title as the headline for your search engine's results. So this is something very important that you don't want to leave blank. And there's a lot of other good reasons to not leave it empty as well. Sometimes it puts placeholder text in there and it looks silly. So make sure that that's always filled out. Okay, now we're going to get into some of our first tags within the body tag itself and demonstrate some basic HTML tags to work with. So our hello world statement we typed before, you could go ahead and put a P tag around this, an opening P and a closing P. And as I mentioned before, acronyms. P is short for paragraph. The P is a paragraph tag in HTML. And if we view this in our browser, you'll notice that the hello world text bumped down a bit. and that is because web browsers have default styling elements that they apply to tags like the paragraph tag. And to further reiterate this and teach another aspect of website design, we're going to view the source of this web page. And the best way to do that in 2019 actually is to use something called the DOM inspector. DOM stands for Document Object Model. If we right click and hit inspect, you will get this very nifty tool that's built into a lot of modern web browsers. And it will give you a bird's eye view of all your code, and you can open and close things with the arrow keys here, and also see all your code you just wrote. Now over here, it will show styles on here, and these are the default styles that are applied by Google Chrome for a paragraph tag. So you'll see 1EM for your block start and your end, and those are things that are more advanced and we're going to get into CSS, but for now, know that browsers can manipulate by default how things look. So now that we did the paragraph tag, we're going to do a heading tag. So before our paragraph tag, we're going to put H1, which stands for heading 1, and there's 6 different headings you could use, by the way, 1 through 6. 1 is the biggest and usually emphasizes a title, the main catchphrase or line of a web page or a blog, or maybe even the name of the site itself. And we'll just call this my first website. And again, you can put whatever text you want in here and save that and refresh. And there it is. So there's our heading. And again, as I was talking about just a minute ago, browsers by default apply their own default styling to HTML elements. In this case, the H1 tag is bolded, so it has a bold font weight and it has a font size of 2EM, and it also has some margin on it, which margin is basically some extra spacing around this text so that it doesn't cram into the paragraph tag or overlap it. And it just makes web pages real easy and simple to read, and that's a tool for people that don't go far enough with CSS or whatever, that they don't style things. The browser will do its own job of basically interpreting this stuff and making it easy to read and visible. Okay, I'm back into Atom now, and another tag I want to teach you guys that's really basic but helpful for differentiating content on a web page is the horizontal rule tag, or the HR tag. So after our paragraph, I'm going to put an HR and close it. And below that, let's try creating another heading tag. We'll put an H2 and second heading here, closing tag, followed by another paragraph, opening arrow P, some more text here, then a closing paragraph tag. And by the way, you can have more than one H1 or H2 tags. There's no rules to that. It's just good practice to typically save that H1 for a major headline or heading. And if we look at that, you'll see in my web browser that I have second heading here and our horizontal line. And as we were talking about earlier, Chrome again applies default styling as well as other web browsers. So by default, it puts like a dark gray or black background on this and some padding and margin. And second heading also has its own default styling elements. And once you get into CSS, you can manipulate all that. You can manipulate the font sizes, the margins. You could change how the HR works, how wide it is, how much padding it has, the color, the thickness, the border type. So there's a lot of ways you can manipulate all this. But here it is, your first basic web page, how to separate content. You got a couple tricks here to make a basic web page now. And one last thing I'd like to teach you is how to encode a web page. And this is very, very important, especially if you're building websites in foreign languages. And this is a very good habit to get into like now when you first start learning, so that you always know to do it. So to encode a web page, what we're going to do is create a meta tag, and this goes inside of the head of the web page. You're going to do an opening tag and type meta, and space, and charset, just like this, CHARSET. ARSET equals, and then you're going to type UTF-8 and close that. Okay, and the meta tag does not require any kind of closing tag like the titles or anything, so don't worry about that. And if we refresh, okay, no difference, but what that has done is made this web page capable of displaying and showing all characters on a web page. So if you're building a website in like French or Japanese or Chinese, mostly like the Asian languages, Chinese and things, Mandarin really, those have trouble sometimes displaying on web pages. So it's very important to use that UTF-8 encoding. That way, it tells the browser that it should accept all types of characters and how to interpret those. It's just basically an encoding thing, and you should always get in the habit of putting this in your web pages. Okay guys, so one last thing I want to talk a little bit in detail about is viewing the source of a web page. We're using the DOM inspector. This tool is so incredibly useful and powerful, not just for HTML, but for your JavaScript. You have a console here, and anytime JavaScript breaks or has an issue or doesn't load something, those errors show up in this console here. So this tool is just so invaluable, and years and years ago when I first started back in like 2005, this didn't really exist yet. So it's great that people today have this, and for me and for anybody else that's in this industry or even builds them for hobbies, you know, you have this. And you can use this not just on your own web pages, but any web pages. So let's go to like, I don't know, Amazon.com, and my console's still open here, and I can read everything in here, and I can even view source this way with Control U, and you can see how Amazon works. And you could do this on any website. You could go on here and see how they're built and how they work, and it's a good learning tool as much as it is for also debugging your own code. And as you can see here, some of our very basic things we learned today are an Amazon's website, the HTML5 doc type, the HTML tag. They got a few more things up here, like a class and a language declaration up here, which isn't super important. And telling Amazon how to build their websites, and head and scripts, and yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff going on in here. So yeah, have some fun and go on your favorite websites like Facebook or wherever you like to go on, and you can do this. You can view the source and use the DOM inspector and see how they work. And oh, here's something. Their website's getting a lot of errors here. See, like images that aren't loading right and things like that. And a lot of these are actually from my ad blocker plugin. So if you have ad block installed, it blocks ads, or if it thinks it's an ad, and when it does that, the console will throw an error. But yeah, have some fun with this and inspect some other websites and learn how the professionals do it. Okay, YouTube, that's a wrap for part 1. If you've made it this far, thanks for watching. So the basics, we learned how to build a basic web page, some of the basic tags, and how to use the DOM inspector and view source to a web page. Check out part 2. We're going to learn the div tag, section tag, and how to create list. So be sure to check that out. And if you like these videos, please like it, subscribe, all that good stuff. It's the best thing you could do in return for me making these. And also drop a comment if you have suggestions or you want to see other videos on different aspects to HTML or other programming languages. The sky is the limit. So again, thanks for watching, and see you next time.